such as this, that's defined as such as this, and they're told that that the reason that that is for exactly what we say as our F2 zone. And then what I heard you say was, doesn't have to generate any revenue or money. I mean, there's got to be some point at which we say, well, it's not viable, right? Because the word viable was in our zone designation.
You're on mute.
The reason I believe the reason the standard requires you to view this property in relationship to surrounding properties is whether or not forestry would be viable if this property were included with surrounding properties. In other words, the standard doesn't look at a single property in isolation and whether or not you would conduct forestry on that property. But if it were, for example, consolidated with surrounding properties, does forestry then become more viable? So the focus of the legal standard is on the area, more and less on the subject property viewed in isolation. So that's why the standard requires you to view this property in its relationship to surrounding properties.
Okay, that's helpful. Thank you. I have other questions, but not. I think I'm feeling like there's more information to review and to read. I am interested in hearing testimony so that we can at least get the record completed, and then perhaps close the record. So then we have all the information that we're going to be evaluating, so we don't have to deal with more information coming in.
Yeah. One more question for me, though. I think, Daniel, I don't know if you can answer this, but does soil change over
time? Nothing is static, but no, Chair Schwartz. I'm just not an expert. I can't necessarily answer that question.
Okay.
I apologize.
I put mulch in my garden so that it changed the soil. I tried to anyway.
Okay. Any more questions before we move on in the hearing?
Like I said, I have a lot more questions, but I think it's important to hear testimony at this time.
Okay, well, we may have more time for questions later. Okay. All right, thank you. So at this time, does the applicant and/or his representative wish to present anything?
Yes, Bill Summerfield for the applicant. I'll try to keep these comments brief because we've gone on quite a bit already. First of all, I would be there. I think I don't mean any disrespect by being on video. We have COVID in my house and we've been quarantined. So that's the reason for my appearance this way today. On the subject of respect, though, I think it's incredibly disrespectful to you folks to drop stuff on you the day of the hearing. They might as well tell you that you don't matter and that you're a waste stop on the way to Luba. And that offends me, and I think it ought to offend you as well. It doesn't give us time to analyze things. And this happened the same at the Planning Commission, and it happened again here. And I don't appreciate trial by ambush. The soil study process, I want to talk about a little bit more. You don't just go randomly pick someone and make them a hired gun to come look at your property. There are a list of 5 people on the DLCD website that are qualified to do this work. And you have to use one of those 5 for it to be accepted by DLCD. Those people put their reputations on the line when they submit reports to DLCD. They're required to certify that it's accurate and truthful. And Gary Kitzrow did that here. Talk a little bit when you're reviewing the second soil study. Notice that that person did not do a site study, and that person didn't even go to the property, didn't even do a drive-by. As opposed to Kitzrow, who dug 24 holes with a backhoe. Also, his questions to Daniel lead me to believe that he maybe doesn't have an idea of the actual test for the zone change. That question seemed awfully naive. As Daniel points out to you, it's not just the soils alone. And I think that's a big factor here. I think the objections are overly focused on the soils and the nature of this property, and not focused enough on its relationship to the residential properties around them. They had no time to any of the comments discuss that relationship. And as Daniel pointed out to you, as staff points out, that is the most important of all the criteria that you have before you. How does this property fit with its surrounding properties? At the planning commission level, staff recommended approval, and you can probably gather that from his staff report here. He is required by the bylaws of the planning commission to, their recommendation is a denial, and he feels obliged to uphold that. But ask him about the PC staff report, why they recommended approval. Or look at it in your record, because it's in your record, in the 1,300 plus pages of your record. For all the reasons he laid out here today in great detail, and I said at the PC, he did a great job, and he did a great job here today as well. For all those reasons, staff is recommending approval based on irrevocably committed exception. Tests like impracticable and demanding are frustrating, and they frustrate lawyers too. The law is full of those kind of tests. We don't have a lot of objective criteria to apply in a case like this. And so when you're asking, how do we gauge that? One way to gauge that is to use your common sense, and to look at the maps and to look at the soil qualities and say, if I were going to try to use property for resource use, is this a property I would use for resources? With the infrastructure that it has on it, with the soil types that it has on it, being in the middle of a residential neighborhood, is this where I would do forestry or farm use? One of the factors that staff pointed out that is a really good point is that you can't really show a lot of conflict without being actively engaged in the farm or forest use. But in fact, your record contains record of a nuisance complaint involving this property for the use of a wood chipper on this property. That was, it's on page 2 of the staff report, and it's, I assume it dates back to 2014. It's code NF 010001, complaint of wood chipper noise. I think that tells you a lot about how this property fits with its surroundings. The physically developed standard is absolutely impossible to meet under Oregon law, in my opinion. But the physically developed calculations are relevant to the totality of the circumstances. If staff is right and 18% of this piece is taken up by infrastructure and unusable, that's 7 acres of this. If applicant is right and it's 30%, that's almost 13 acres of it gone and unusable. And those, when you're starting with a 40-acre parcel, I think that's highly relevant and important when you start shrinking its size down that dramatically. When you're reviewing the soil study from Gary Kitzrow, look at what he actually did. He dug 24 holes and he sifted through the dirt and analyzed it. As we said, I think one of the questions said that's what scientists do, and that is what scientists do. My brief review of the second report is that it's a paper review. They looked at Kitzro's work and want to poke holes in it. The objectors have sort of tried to label Gary Kitzrow as a hired gun or someone that we hired to get a specific result. I think that's really unfair to Gary Kitzrow and offensive. And he did have to certify his report was valid when he submitted it to DLCD. The other report was not submitted to anyone except you folks. It isn't certified to be anything. And it was expressly commissioned by these folks to poke holes in Kitzrow's report. From a brief review, I don't think it refutes anything in Kitzrow's report. It seems to take issue with the overall calculation. But either way, the soil breaks out very close to 50% as to suitable versus unsuitable soils. But again, that's only one factor of many in making this determination. And I think we're overemphasizing that. It's an important factor. It's probably the most important factor because it's the new one on remand from all the things we looked at last time. But it's only one factor. And what Luba told us, what Luba told staff, is you got to do a better job with the findings in discussing not only this property, but also its relationship to the other properties surrounding it. And that's precisely what staff has done here. Much more detailed analysis and a very good analysis of how this fits. For me, the map was always really compelling. When you saw the FF10, the purple line that gets broken, this is the only property that touches 7 Mile. But I think staff's comment about it being a buffer zone is even better. And the idea that there are no zero resource zones touching residential zones anywhere else on the map that you can find. And I'll circle back to the wood chipper complaint. That's why you want to have that buffer. FF10 is a great buffer. It doesn't preclude resource use. It doesn't preclude habitat use. It's just a slightly more permissive zone that acts as that buffer between resource and residential use. It's frankly the zone that this should have been all along. So when you're applying common sense, I think it makes perfect sense to adopt this zone for this property. Planning Commission was really worried about opening the floodgates somehow, and I don't see it. It's almost impossible to get to the point we're at right now. We've been years in the process here, working on this one single property for rezoning it. You have to get a soil study because the USDA mapping controls if you don't have a site-specific study. And you are not going to open any floodgates if you change the zoning on this property. Each property is unique. This one in particular, being the only property on 7 Mile Hill, this zoned resource is as unique as they come. I guess you can't get any more unique than unique, but it's really unique. The totality of those circumstances that I see here, you're starting with a small property at 40 acres. You're chopping off a fair bit of it with infrastructure that is legal and permitted, and you're entitled to count as being property removed from resource use. You've got a majority of the soils on the property that are not suited for resource use. And the fact that there may be trees growing in some of those soils is not relevant to whether it's resource use. You cannot do this analysis from a drive on the road and taking pictures of random trees growing somewhere on the property. That does not mean that it's suited for this use. Most importantly, I think that is the relationship, as Daniel said, between this property and the adjoining properties. And again, this property fits much better as F10 than it does as F280. That's the proper zone for this. this property is not in the big game overlay. We addressed that at the first hearing, and it's never has been. It's, I think, just north of here or something, but it's not a factor in this. One thing too, as staff pointed out, this zone change will not automatically create new home sites. You have to get conditional use permits for each and every construction you would want to do on this. And so you're not automatically open up development here. People that want to develop these parcels will have to come to you and get a conditional, or come to the planning commission and get a conditional use permit. Other than that, staff did a bang up job of addressing everything I wanted to address. And I thank him for that, and I'll shut up. Thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Summerfield. And I wish you a speedy recovery as well as your family. All right, so let's see, with the applicant, oh, did you want to question Mr. Summerfield?
Maybe.
Okay.
Can I do that?
Yeah. Do you want to listen to the applicant first, or?
Well, I just had a fairly
Okay.
specific question.
Okay,
So I think you mentioned, and I'm not sure if you can answer this, but you mentioned something about the certification of the report, the soils report. And I remember somewhere in the 3,000 plus pages of documents, so there was an application to somebody and money paid to someone about, I think, certifying the soils report. Can you give me a little bit more information on what that is and who might have certified it?
Yes, when you want to get one of these soil studies through DLCD, you have to hire one of their 5 people. They have to follow a prescribed form and submit it to DLCD saying, here's what I found at this site. I think you pay them $600 for that, although you pay Kidsrow a lot more, but DLCD gets $600. DLCD checks the boxes on that and sees whether or not it meets the criteria, and then sends it to the county, which is what happened here. In submitting that form to DLCD, there's a section of it that Kidsrow has to sign and basically say, I swear this is true and accurate, and I submit it to you. And so that was my point about the certification.
Okay, thank you. I remember reading it. I didn't recall who actually certified it. So thank you for that information.
so you're saying that the Brian T. Raby that has not gone through DLCD and signed, sealed and delivered by the soil survey expert?
No, not from my very brief read of it. I think it's just an opinion letter given to Ms. Dooley for use in this hearing.
Okay. All right. Okay, so would the applicant like to speak?
Sure.
Hello, Mr. Wilson. And please remember, please do not present irrelevant, immaterial, or unduly repetitious testimony at this time. Okay,
I'll
thank
do
you.
my best. I'm
All
not
right.
a good speaker and I'm getting nervous, and
It's all
so
good.
bear with me, please.
Welcome.
So in regards to what we were just talking about, as far as these, certified soil analysts, and my lawyer's got covered, and he, I can't hardly understand it because my hearing is so bad. But to make it clear to me, so that you know that the information that he gathered from my property goes right straight to DLCD, and there's a $650 fee for them to review what he has. So there's a group of people at DLCD that do this all the time, and they review his work and certify it. And then that got sent to the county. I don't have to let it come to the county, but I signed a release form saying that, so the county could have it. The other little matter there is I had no idea how this was going to go. I'm spending a lot of money, to hire this gentleman and to go through DLCD and to do this, because I had some strange feelings about the property. You know, you couldn't even get, nothing grows in that lower area. Not on the ridge. Yes, we have some pine trees growing there and stuff, but they're still over 35 years old. Those trees that are in that pasture, and they're not very big. But my point is I took a risk, to go ahead and have done by a scientist and, done right, so that I knew if it would have went the other way and they were, number 2 soils or maybe all 4 soils, we wouldn't be here. I wouldn't be pursuing this because I don't like just handing out money after money after money. Nobody does. I would consider it as probably just a lost cause. But because the soils came back like they did, we're here. So I just have, and you have this and you've seen it, but I want to make some points, and I have copies for each of you. Again, they got sent to you, and some of my biggest concerns are that for 10 years plus, I've heard nothing about forestry to the south of me. No one's ever, including the county, writes it down in their reports and stuff. There is no timber to the south of me. And here's your direction map right here. There's south. There's my upper property. And there's no forestry in here at all. Never has been. And for them to keep saying that I have managed forest by Ken Thomas to the south of me is just false. You can see, this is a colored map. So you can see where the forestry is. It's well to the west and to the south, but not in, these are all pine trees, scattered pine trees, not a bunch of pine trees, mostly oaks. So when you see like over here across on this side of 7 Mile, you'll see some dense areas with some pines, and you'll see them in this ravine here. And you'll see there's a little ridge right here that has some pine trees on it. But this is exactly where Eastern Oregon starts. Right here. It's dry, a drier climate. Everything changes. That's why there's never been trees out here. It's just not there. And to say that, and I'm having to deal with it, I've had to listen to this for 10 years. Okay. And I just want to make it clear that that's false information. It's been on the record. People have been talking about it for all these years, that there's forestry to the south of me. And I've heard as many times as sometimes there's 3 forest on 3 sides of me. It's just not true. And I want to make that clear. And there's the proof. It's not like I'm making it up. So that's the one issue. One of the other things is, and I'm not one to try to I'm trying my best not to embarrass somebody or say something wrong. But the Planning Commission did not have their act together at all. Whenever they were doing this, I don't think any of them read all the information because there was a whole bunch of pages to it. And I'm not even sure that they even read what Daniel, his report said, because the questions and the way that they deliberated was an embarrassment. And I don't want to say that to cut them down, but they were not prepared. And they didn't understand what we were trying to do. The one word that you asked how to pronounce, they didn't even understand what that was about. So it's just, they needed, this is important to me. And they should have took the time to review everything and read it and know what they were coming in and getting involved in, and they did not.
Do you have any more points to cover?
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
So you have copies of pretty much everything, and I know my voice is coarse. I can't hardly stand to listen to myself. So my lawyer mentioned that you know, that we're not gonna bring on onslaught of things because of the soil report. First off is the amount of money it costs. You know, it's ridiculous. I got involved in this and continued forward, and it's been, you know, I'm well over $80,000. And he told me to tell you the number. I've been keeping it to myself because it's just ridiculous. You're not gonna get a bunch of people going in and trying to do zone changes, you know, because it's just not feasible. And it's a risk. You don't know if it's gonna go your way or not, you know, so I wanted to mention that because he asked me to. And Daniel, his report is thorough, even the one, the first one with the planning commission. He did a very good job. And all it would have took is to try to, you know, I had to reread it 3 or 4 times to understand some of the verbiage in it. And if you read that and studied it, you know that Daniel knew what he was talking about. You know, he did a really good job. No complaints there. And I think that's very important, even for you guys to go, if you haven't read it, to go back and read his first report. You know, and that's why, you know, he recommended it going through because of all the other things involved, not just the soil report. I have a lot of things here, you know, in the petitioner's information, they claim that immediately behind my property is forest land. Well, you have the map. It's not so. You know, and so there's a lot of things here I could go through. I have a whole list of about 10, but I don't want to go into, most of them are to rebut the things that they've used and said in their comments that are just not true. It's just the example, in my opinion, of this stuff that shows up at 11 o'clock last night should be thrown out, shouldn't be allowed at all. In any kind of court of law, you don't bring in testimony at, you know, the last minute. It's disrespectful for everybody. Nobody has time to review it. Nobody has time to do anything, and we're in the middle of this. You know, it should just be thrown out. The other thing is, is he just looking at the report? But the big thing is, did he take his own samples? No, nobody come to my property and take more samples and go through DLCD and have them review it. Has DLCD reviewed his comments? This is the first I even heard that this showed up, was today. I mean, just now. I didn't even know that there was some other soil analyst even involved. No one's contacted me. No one's asked me anything. And I'll bet you anything, it didn't go through DLCD. It's just his opinion. You know, so that means a lot. I mean, if you don't go through the correct channels, you shouldn't have, the opinion doesn't matter. And especially the time zone line. You know, their lawyer did the same thing the last time. Stuff showed up 5 hours before our meeting, and Daniel didn't even have time to send it out to my lawyer and get to review it. And it's a pattern that is not correct. You don't get away with this in any kind of court of law. You got a deadline, you either meet it or it doesn't show up. You don't get it. You know, and I know this is different, but that's not fair to anyone. You know, my lawyer doesn't have a chance to review it. You don't have a chance to review it. The planners didn't get to see it. I actually didn't get it for 3 weeks after it was gotten to Daniel because they got busy down there and even get the information because it showed up late. So all those things are just not the way it should be ran. And I have a couple of things to say about the existing home down there, the whole homestead, that they're, you know, it's falling down and the barn's falling down and some comments like that. Well, yeah, it is. And I tried my best to block it up, you know, so that it wouldn't completely fall down. But you can't. You get a stop work order on it from the county because you can't legally do anything because you can't get a permit to do anything because it's not a home. That in itself, that home dates back to 1860. You would think, as environmentalists, they'd want to preserve that. I'm not allowed to do anything with it. It's probably the first home on 7 Mile. If not the first, it's right there within the first few. And it deserves to be restored and that property be a legal lot. You know, we're not talking about going in and putting a subdivision in. If you take the log home that's there, fix up and maybe, you know, do some additions on the old home and still make it look like an old home, you know, in the front, and then 2 more homes for the whole property. It's not like we're going up there and just overwhelming the property. And every place on those maps, if you look at them, has trees. Trees and homes go together, don't they? You know, I mean, we're not, you know, we're not talking about, you know, it's just the normal way up there. That's the reason why people live up there is because you have a, you know, nice yard with some trees and you fix it up. I do go out of the way to make sure that I keep the fire hazard down. I'm adamant about that. I fought fires for years and I know what it takes to live in the woods, you know, and I take care of that. That's probably about all I need to say. I got a whole list, but it's all not positive. So I'm good.
Do you have questions, Mr. Wilson?
No, thank you.
You said no?
No,
I have no questions. Thank you. Thank you very much for coming. Okay. Right. So are there any persons here who wish to speak in favor of the request? Hello, would you please state your name and address? I'm sorry?
David Rogers. I've been a resident of this county for
address.
68557 Mile Hill. Just over the hill.
Could you maybe come up just because it might not be a microphone
for these guys.
Not too intimidating.
No, I want to make sure everybody hears you. I want to make sure people.
Well, it's to get under people's skin sometimes. Anyway, I read the majority of the paperwork that was submitted in this review and that, and I mean, there's a lot of redundancy in there and other things that without some way of justifying what the comments or the views or the opinions were in a fashion where you know that they're correct or whatever. I think, you know, it's been a lot of tit for tat and that kind of stuff. The fact that papers have been submitted at the last minute, which weren't available to us folks that are concerned about things like this in our county and where we're going. That all needs to be improved upon, I guess. I supported his application. After I walked that land, I, you know, was a fertilizer and weed consultant for many years in the late 70s, early 80s, all over that hill for Corchies and other families that attempted to raise crops or still raise crops there. So I do know the soils. My family has a farm in Timber and Dufur that we've managed for over 50 years. So I'm no stranger to forest practices or especially crops and that. And then on top of that, who's not to say that if this was developed, that the folks that end up there are not going to be better stewards of the land than what's going on now. I mean, we're all interested in the longevity of this planet and so I think that's something should be considered. The fact that we have very little land in the county that can be subdivided or developed due to administrative rules or things that have happened in the last 35, 40 years has precluded a lot of folks back when we bought our land and divided it up. Now the divisions we did, we legally can't build a house because the rules changed. So I think a little bit of common sense needs to enter into the mix here. We need places for folks to go and live. This is not a forest land area that has a sustainable ability to grow trees there, unless you're gonna live to be as old as Noah, you're not gonna get any real benefit out of doing that, other than being a good steward of the land and keeping it up and not doing things that are damaging or hurtful to the property. So in lieu of that, I mean, it's surrounded by residents, all except for 280 feet or something I measured on one side. I walked the property, took my metal detector up there, looked at Mr. Wilson's map, and pretty much found the infrastructure. When I was a young man, there was houses on that hill where he's showing them, because at that time, people were living there that were growing stuff for other folks to use, you know what I'm saying? So, I mean, I was attest to that. But I think the whole fact that, I mean, for the laymen that are on our planning commission to understand 3,300 pages or whatever this is going on to about what's going on and make a decision. You know, that's why we have LUBA, that's why we have you, guardians of our county, that's your job. So it was proven in there that some of the goals that they said weren't being met were met, and the fine little gray lines between this and that and this and that are either being misinterpreted, or the concept of it isn't understood by the folks in the planning commission. I mean, this is a complicated issue. It's not something that's simple. I mean, it's probably even hard for you guys to understand some parts of it. Fortunately, some of us may have a little background in reading legal writing or whatever, but you know, irregardless of that, it's a very complicated issue. So I think I mean, to me, it almost, to this point, we should just take a vote by everybody else in the county and forget the whole process. Maybe that's what we need to do, because it's not only causing ill feelings. I've known these folks here longer than I've known this guy. So it's not like I'm a stranger to anybody in this room. So I just want to make the point that we got to have some development in this county. If show me a better spot, let's go for that. And maybe that'll end the whole argument. But if you're taking, I mean, any law can be interpreted in more than one form. So, I mean, if any of you have been before a judge before and tried to argue, you probably found that out, that your opinion doesn't really matter. It's what the law says. But taking that same law, one for one purpose or another purpose, is just how it can be so difficult for everybody to understand.
Thank you, Mr. Rogers. Do you have more to say on the specific points of this application?
Excuse me?
Do you have any more to offer on the specific areas of this application?
You're done with me.
No, well, thank you very much. All right. I guess I would ask if there's anybody on Zoom that would like to speak in favor of the request. I didn't hear anybody, but.
Ron Schmidt has a hand raised.
Yeah, I'd like to say something in support of Dave. I think that property is.
Excuse me, Ron, could you introduce yourself and give us your address, please? Thank you.
My name is Ron Schmidt. I live at 2048 State Road. And the property up there, I think, is surrounded with the current development around it. I think it's a good use for that property. I've watched a lot of people a few people try to attempt to farm it over the years since I've been up there, and most of them give up after 1 year. So, soils reporter, no, it just doesn't look like a place that you could do much with other than. As terms of a resource land. Anyway, that's my opinion. Thank you for your time, and have a great day.
Thank you, Mr. Schmidt.
Thank you.
Anybody else on Zoom would like to unmute themselves or raise their hand in favor of this request? Okay, I don't see any at this time. Okay, is there any person who wished to speak in opposition to this application?
Chair Schwartz, Mike Sargitakis on behalf of Sheila Dooley and Jill Barker, if I may.
I'm sorry, Chris.
Legal staff, Mike.
Yeah, Mike Sargitakis on behalf of Sheila Dooley and Jill Barker in opposition.
Oh, okay,
Can
okay.
you hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay, yeah, Mike Sargitakis. My address is 735 Southwest First Avenue, second floor, Portland, Oregon, 97204. I'll try and be really brief. I provided full comments to both Planning Commission and to the board yesterday via Mr. Doherty. On the issue of trial by ambush, my client didn't get her soil report or rebuttal report until last night, and I didn't even get a chance to review it till late. To Mr. Summerfield's point, the applicant always gets the last word on this stuff. So I take umbrage with the idea that my client or I are ambushing anyone. I didn't get a copy of the staff report until late last week. So my comments were prepared on a short timeline as well. The notice for this meeting noted that testimony and comments would be accepted up through this meeting. And as Mr. Crean noted, the hearing can, and it sounds like likely should be held open. If a decision maker wishes to close a record pursuant to its rules on another timeline, it may. Beyond that, I appreciate private property issues are emotionally charged. And if Mr. Wilson feels slighted by this, I'm sorry about that. I would encourage him to request the record be held open for the maximum time allowable so that all parties can review all the information submitted today and responses can be filed.
Excuse me, Mr. Sargitakis,
Yes.
could you please slow down a little bit between the audio and your very fast talker? It's hard to catch everything. So thank you.
Certainly. So just to the sort of the issue at hand, Mr. Sommerfeld noted the wood chipper complaint. This issue was briefed and discussed before LUBA, and this is not the kind of conflict that is sufficient to establish an irrevocable commitment in a resource zone. Mr. Doherty noted earlier that roads can't be used to justify a developed exception. I want to add that under Oregon law, no development allowed by the goal can be used to justify the developed exception. So there was some discussion earlier about infrastructure, things like that. So as long as those pieces of development are allowed by the goal, they can't be used to justify an exception. Regarding the subject parcels adjacency to the residential zone, the law is also clear on that. Absence evidence of actual conflicts, that adjacent rural residential zoning is insufficient to demonstrate an irrevocable commitment. This issue was also briefed before LUBA, and I presented some of that in my comments to Planning Commission and to you all. Further, the supposed diminished soil capacity is largely in areas that are developed, and the soil survey shows that the areas that are mowed actually have the better soil quality, and so to that point, the proportion of available higher quality soils would seem to tip the opposite direction when you consider the unsuitable soils under the allowed development. I just want to talk a little bit about the issue of profitability, because there was some discussion about that today, and there was significant discussion about that at the Planning Commission hearing. I'm concerned that there's not a complete explanation on the record for what that standard is and the exceedingly low floor for what Oregon law considers profit in the context of resource lands and under ORS 215.203. The term profit means a gross income, and it's explained a little more fully in the LUBA case, Brown v. Jefferson County. That's 33 OR LUBA 418 at the pin site 433. That's a 1996 case. And that's quoting an Oregon Court of Appeals case, 1000 Friends of Oregon v. Benton County. That's at 32 ORAP 413, pin sites 426. That's a 1978 case. This is well-established law. There's really no controversy around that issue. Given that, and given the historic use of the property for hay, which was baled on site, and the existence of ponderosa pine elsewhere throughout the property, there's really no colorable claim that the property is not, quote, capable now or in the future of being currently employed for agricultural production for the purpose of obtaining profit and money, which is the requirement under ORS 215.203. Oregon law doesn't require a county to determine profit margins, analyze business plans, or examine balance sheets. This merely requires a common sense look at the current and past use of the property to see if anything of value is or could be grown there. Here we have our answer because hay, which has value, and ponderosa pine trees, which are of value, are grown here, according to information provided by the applicant in the application. Because the only new information since the LUBA opinion on this matter is around soil quality, presumably to refute the notion that this property is capable of resource use, and yet we have actual evidence in the record of actual resource uses, the soil survey cannot be seen as substantial evidence of irrevocable commitment in the face of actual historic and current uses. Aside from that soil survey, this board is left with the pre-existing record upon which LUBA already held it is, quote, extremely unlikely that an exception could be granted. And that's from the Dooley et al. The Wasco County LUBA number 2019-065 at page 21 of their opinion on the merits. Beyond that point, I would offer that if the county is unable or even uninterested in committing further resources in this matter to drafting findings reflecting these conclusions, I would be happy to submit draft findings to that end if I could have a week from when the hearing is fully closed to draft them. With that, I'll yield any remaining time I may have, unless you all have questions I might answer.
Questions? You mentioned a draft at the very end. What were you, could you repeat that slowly?
Sure. So if the county doesn't want to, spend more staff time on this, drafting findings that reflect any of the points I've made in my comments or in my testimony today, I'm happy to provide draft findings to you all that staff can then, work with and present to you for adoption or not.
Okay, thank you. Okay.
Certainly.
Question?
Not at this time, thank you.
No, okay, and I have no questions. So
Thank you.
Thank you. Let's see. So others that would like to speak in opposition to the application?
Should I stand up or just?
You can sit, it's fine.
Just speak up.
If you can.
I really want to apologize. I really want to apologize.
Your name.
Right.
Yeah.
Sheila Dooley, 3300 Bensel Road, Mosher, Oregon. Or that you probably have memorized, but no. Okay, I really want to apologize for this piece information getting to you so late. I just received it myself last night. Last week I looked on the list of the DLCD, the list of approved soil scientists. There are like 5 of them. So I contacted one of the people, Michael Sowers, which is one of the people listed in the firm that did the review. And let's see, there's like 5 people listed. And I could mention DLCD. They just review these reports, for completeness only, not accuracy. So that's one of the reasons I contacted to see if somebody else could review it.
Excuse me, Sheila. Can everyone on Zoom hear Ms. Dooley?
I cannot.
Not.
Okay, I think you will have to.
Stand, try to start over, okay.
Sheila Dooley, 3300 Bensel Road, Mosher, Oregon. See, first off, I really want to apologize for getting you this information so late. I just received it myself last night. The person who, the firm that did the review is Michael Sowers, is listed on the DLCD list of approved soil scientists, and that's how I got the contact information. Hillary Foote, there's a letter from Hillary Foote in the packet or somewhere in the record from DLCD that states that they review the soil information for completeness only and not accuracy. Let's see. LUBA, I could mention that LUBA addressed the issue of the forest land to the south was addressed in the previous staff report that went to LUBA. A few other comments. God, I wish I had something to drink, whatever. Okay. Valley Science and Engineering conducted the review of the applicant soil survey. They were unable to confirm the report's findings that the site qualifies as non-resource land. Based on observations in the soil survey report and available data from the NRCS web soil survey, Valley concluded that 11 of the soil test sites represent soils that appear to be class 6 or better instead of class 7. Based on their review, they concluded that class 6 or better soils represent greater than 50% of the average. Therefore, the site doesn't satisfy the criteria for conversion to a non-resource zone. See, and I've got some following comments that are not their comments, they're my comments. And there were photographs I submitted in my written testimony that start on page 592 if you haven't seen them. The previous NRCS soil survey found the soils to be more productive than average and suited to growing ponderosa pine and Oregon white oak. These trees, as well as fir trees, are growing on the areas of the property not mowed and are visible in the aerial and other photographs. The applicant's soil survey found a difference of less than 1.5 acres between the suited and unsuited soils. This was out of 40 acres. They labeled over 1.5 acres of infrastructure when there's actually only 0.2 acres of actual infrastructure if you include the 2 unusable buildings, a metal barn with no roof and the decommissioned house that's missing a exterior wall and windows. Both of these are too poor of condition to be used. I could mention the mode. Okay. The applicant's soil survey incorrectly labeled areas as infrastructure such as vacant land and treed areas. And these are visible on the photographs on page 592 and 593. There are no class 8 soils on the property, just areas of class 4 soils that have been labeled class 8 infrastructure. And I could mention the mode areas are mostly all class 4 soils in both, in both surveys. And that's a suited soil. Okay, other considerations or other comments, I was unable to locate some of the test hole numbers on the map due to the presence of so many trees. Most of these in areas that supposedly can't grow trees. There are numerous pine, oak, and fir trees present on the property. Most of these are in areas classified as unsuited class 7. Areas not used to grow hay are similar in appearance to other Mosier area forest zone properties. Pine, oak, and fir trees are often seen growing together. Pine and oak trees have similar soil requirements according to the Soil and Water Conservation District. Ponderosa pine is a suitable tree for reforestation and a marketable species. According to ODF, it's one that's used quite a bit in the Mosier area. The staff finding in the LUBA record states that the property contains merchantable timber. OSU Extension stated that if healthy ponderosa pine is present on the property, that's a good indication it will do well if planted. At the December 7th Planning Commission staff report stated that the parcel has been removed from farm forest tax deferral. The property is part of a 109-acre tract, it was all rated as suitable soil on the NRCS survey. This 109-acre tract is owned by the applicant. The adjoining 69-acre parcels in farm deferral. 2018, the applicant received retroactive approval of a 7,000 square foot ag exempt building in conjunction with his existing and future farm use described in his farm plan. At that hearing in January 2018, the Planning Commission hearing, his attorney stated that the applicant makes substantial income from farm production each year the property has been deferral. The applicant stated he is planning to farm an additional 20 acres, waiting to plant more alfalfa, plowing additional land adjacent to 6 acres of barley, oats, and planning to expand the farm use, increase the number of cattle grazed. Although the applicant is farming this 69-acre parcel, he has chosen to not actively farm the 40-acre subject parcel beyond growing grass hay. Choosing to not actively farm this parcel, plant trees or let them come back naturally, or reinstate a tax deferral was most likely done to support the claim that the property should be rezoned. As the entire record, including the new evidence, does not demonstrate that the property is either physically developed or irrevocably committed to non-resource uses, the rezone request should be denied. Thank you.
Okay, let's see. Is there anyone else that would like to speak in opposition to this application?
Yes, please.
Okay.
I'll lower my mask because now I don't feel fully dressed.
Name?
My name is Phil Swain. I live at 3300 Gunsel Road, Mosier, Oregon. I've been driving past the said property of Mr. Wilson's since about 1965 on a regular basis. I lived on State Road from 1973 to about 1977 and then moved back to the Mosier area in the late 80s. So I know the property. The Deckers, the previous owners in the 60s and 70s, always baled hay and always grazed cattle on that piece of property. And so, let's see, where do we start? There was a number of issues that come up here, and I need glasses. The issue of buffer zones, the parcel only touches a buffer zone that's an RR10 on the north side of the property across 7 Mile. All the other contacts with it is the FF10 zone, which is purple on the map. And just because they parcelized all of 7 Mile back in 110 years ago, doesn't mean we should continue such practices. The conflict between zones that you have is a conflict. You'll always have conflict between neighbors, no matter what the zone is. We have conflicts with our neighbors, and we're all in an FF10 zone or an F2. So to say you're going to protect the residential people from the farming activities is kind of a moot point, I feel. The issue of commercial versus small scale timber production. For the last 10 or 15 years, nationwide, the majority of log supplies to mills has come from small scale woodlot owners on 40-acre pieces. And most of the mills these days are sized for smaller diameter trees. There's a penalty for actually having larger diameter trees of over 21 inches in diameter. Growing trees is a long-term project. It's not something where you get a profitability every year or every 10 years. I'm sure that Ken Thomas, who owns probably 4,000 acres in Wasco County, doesn't make a profit every year on his property. And he owns forest land all over the place. To say that there's not forest property directly south of the Bonneville power line shown on the map, it's all there. It might not be a dark green. The pictures produced by the applicant at the hearing in December showed a washed out photo that to the southeast is actually Grant Robbins hayfield and grazing property. And to the northeast is Corshey's wheatland and Ortley. And driving up over 7 Mile, when you get over in the interface between resource zone and residential again, at the top of 7 Mile, you're going to be into those zones. They're Ag 2, A2 zones, just a mile away from this property. DLCD has a disclaimer on their paperwork that says it does not certify the accuracy of the soil study. And it was only a standard to see if the paperwork is completed properly. The applicants put forth a new site plan that is radically different from the one in the LUBA record. Commenting on this application is difficult as the facts and numbers keep changing. There's a non-existent buffer requirement along the 50-foot setback of 7 Mile Road, although none is required per Arthur Smith. The non-existent 50-foot buffer zone contains 60+ pine trees from 2 to 40 feet in height. In regards to the 30-foot wide easements for power plants lines, there is no such requirement for underground utilities. The only power lines of concern are those owned and maintained by Wasco Electric Co-op. There are no required setbacks for buried lines, but on page 49, there's a long list of buried lines with 30-foot easement. The applicant claims to have a total of over 10,024 feet of lines on the property. But in reality, there's only 450 feet of overhead lines shown on the new site plan. This is on page 1390. The map, the way it's drawn, is a dotted line for the overhead lines, and he shows a solid red line for the underground lines, which technically you should have done that the other way. The dotted lines usually indicate underground for power. The buffer zone around structures for 50 feet, Wasco County Ruler does not prohibit trees within 50 feet of the structure. They encourage buffers as long as they're properly maintained with limbing up 8 feet and brush removed around the area. In the original report from 2018, when this all started, it listed the log house as 2,680 square feet, including decks. But in the new site plan, it's listed as 80 by 100 or 8,000 square feet in area. And then they expand out of that to almost take up an acre of land just for the safety zone around the house. So I question what we're supposed to be responding to when the inaccuracies and change from hearing to hearing. Like I said, I've been driving past that property for over 55 years, and I never saw any trailer sites that were of any permanence on the property to show that it was developed in any great degree. There might have been some temporary camp trailers in there, but they're gone. And so 2/3 of the 40-acre parcel is tree covered. 90% of the alleged add soils on the south and east are tree covered. There are over 500 pine trees growing on the 28 acres, many that are merchantable. The balance of the acreage to mowed field is a prime soil type. Trees that would naturally be seeded there if it was left unmowed. Even Douglas fir probably, as evidenced by a water course down the center of the property with a willow tree growing outside the old homestead, which requires a lot of water. Anyway, please reject the proposed zone change.
Thank you, Mr. Swain. Okay. Is there anyone else on, oh, hello, sorry. Hi. Hi.
My name is Jill Barker. I live at 3375 Bensel Road. Mosier. Regarding Wilson's remand application, the statement that there's a literal moonscape nature of the adjoining property south of the subject property, in quotes, cannot be substantiated. That same land to the south and east has been productive forest, hay, and grazing fields, including that formerly owned by Grant Robbins since the 1970s. This is hardly a moonscape. The new site plan submitted in the remand application has changed considerably from the original site plan submitted in the original 2019 LUBA record. There is much new infrastructure shown that does not exist, such as 3 trailer sites, as well as additional driveways, power lines, and septic drain fields. It appears that this non-existent infrastructure has been included to add to buffer zones in an attempt to preclude forestry use. The applicant appears to be adding this proposed physical development to make a physically developed case after the fact. LUBA ruled that the property was not physically developed based on the evidence. Is the applicant trying to show that it is more developed than it actually is, suggesting that it is irrevocably committed to non-resource use? Question. It is completely irresponsible for any county to allow more residential development in a high fire risk, high wind area in an unprecedented drought condition with declining aquifers and wells in the vicinity. Oregon Department of Forestry has identified the area as one of particularly high fire risk, and quotes from ODF. Dwellings increase risk of fire, restrict control tactics, complicate the protection priorities, and require additional coordination that result in increased costs. And that's from the commissioner's packet on page 13. The description of potential conflict between residential and forestry use is unfounded. There is no house on the tract to the west of the property, and the applicant's house is on the adjoining parcel to the south. Both properties are zoned F2. To the north, across the road, there is a tree farm. The house on the property to the east of the subject property is on the other side of that property and located south of the subject property. And that's on page 33 of the commissioner's packet. It was stated at the Planning Commission hearing by the applicant's attorney that the property was not in the big game winter range. As a correction, the GIS map shows this property as being in the Environmental Protection District 8, the Sensitive Wildlife Habitat Overlay Zone, which is the big game winter range. It's just a new name for the same thing. Not everyone realizes that growing trees is a long-term investment, as it can take 60 to 80-year cycle to grow a tree. We have over 300 acres of forest land in Mosier, southwest of the subject property. Much of it is similar in appearance to the Wilson property, with the same pine oak habitat along with Douglas fir trees. that the Mosier area is known for. We have replanted areas that have been grazed or mowed or let them grow back naturally with very favorable results. The areas on the subject property that have been mowed are very suitable for growing trees. Nearly all class 4 soils in the applicant's soil survey. And incidentally, class 4 soil is a very good soil type, not as was suggested earlier that it's borderline or marginal. Class 4 is considered a good soil type. You can look that up. And it's the Wamic soils. And in the past produced hay each year. In 1977, I assisted in the purchase of hay from that same field from the previous owner, Sam Decker. The fact that the applicant is not using most of his property for forest purposes and has not replanted the open field with trees or let them grow back naturally does not make it any less valuable as forest land. I find it obviously refutable to claim that soils on the applicant's property that are presently growing many trees are supposedly nevertheless incapable of growing trees due to unsuitable soil classifications. You just look at the pictures of the property and you see the trees there's lots of mature trees. There's all kinds of trees on the unmowed areas. Some years ago, in the process of doing fire fuel reduction on that property, the mechanical grub hoeing of the understory removed many young seedling and sapling trees in those areas. In spite of this, there are still numerous trees in the alleged unsuitable soil areas as shown in aerial photographs. As the property does not meet the criteria for either physically developed or irrevocably committed exception, the application should be denied. Thanks for your attention.
Thank you. Okay, is there anyone on Zoom that would like to speak in opposition to the application? Please raise your hand or unmute, speak up. Okay, hearing none. Let's see. Do you have any questions at this point?
No.
Okay.
I have some questions, but it's not about.
Not, okay,
Yeah,
okay.
right.
All right. And so next, does the applicant have any rebuttal?
Williams probably is going to speak up.
Yes. Mr. Summerfield?
Yeah, very, very briefly. I love that comment from Ms. Barker. You can look it up as to the class 4 soils. The commissioner did. He read you the definition. Yeah, they're resource soils, but they're not the best resource soils out there. As to the comment or the allegation that this is some long game with Mr. Wilson not farming the property as a way to get a zone change, the reason he's not farming the property is that it won't support the use. And the best evidence of that is probably the letter from Steve Hunt in the record that was alluded to earlier. The Mr. Sargetakis comment about generating a gross profit. I cited to you the Weatherell case, and gross profit is not the test in Oregon. Anybody can make a gross profit. My neighbor sells eggs, and that would be a gross profit, I suppose. It's more nuanced than that. Gross profit is a factor, but you look at other factors and determine does it make sense, basically, as to whether the property can produce an income. I had an opportunity to read through the soil study that was submitted this morning, and there seems to be a fundamental misunderstanding in that review about what it means when their property, misunderstanding about what the property is 51% or less than 50% productive soils. That is not the test. As staff pointed out to you, it's one factor, but it is not the test for whether the property is productive or not, or useful resource land. the commenters want to commingle the property that Dave owns to the south, the 69-acre property, when it's convenient for them. And staff did a really good job of analyzing that for you in the staff report. You do not commingle those properties in looking at this application. There's much allegation about the site plan be changing. Very upfront about that. The site plan was only changed to reflect reasonable buffer zones around each structure, which makes sense. You can't grow resource stuff on top of structures or even right up next to it. That's the only change that occurred. And nobody's trying to pull the wool over anybody's eyes. We're just trying to depict for you what it would be like to try to use this property for resource use. Thanks, that's all I have.
Mr. Wilson?
Yes, I have some things to say again.
Okay.
In regards to the site plan changing, that was by request from Luba. They asked me, I said, how do I go about that? They said, take a map and write and draw out all the utility lines and stuff, which we had not done. We had put the home sites on there and the square footage of the house itself originally. I'm not changing stuff and making stuff up. Dave Rogers actually walked the property and verified all those utility lines that are on that map. So, you know, to say that I'm just making things up, you know, as I go here is wrong. It's just not how I do things. I'm very honest. And so anyway, the utility lines and the water lines and the sewer lines and all those and the phone lines are all there. In fact, I'd load everybody up in Suburbans and take them up there and show them what they would like. You know, I got no issues with that. Now, as far as on the east side of the property, it shows a couple of manufactured homes and there was power to those homes. Those were not trailers, camp trailers or anything. They were there. And if anybody that's been there for 25 years would have seen those homes. They were put on there when I think Black had it or something. They weren't legal. There's no permits or anything for them, but they put them there. Mobile homes, and they were there for quite a few years. There was one on the east side, right straight over from the old home in the ravine. And then there was one up in the ravine. And they actually, I don't know what you call it, but they had done some legal lot of sell or something that was, it was illegal, but they sold them and people moved in there. And they were people living there when I bought my property, the upper property, not that lower property. And so, you know, to say that they were just camp trailers or whatever, they weren't. They had power to them. They had a well put in. They thought that they owned them, you know, until they found out that they were illegally subdivided, and they did it. So one of the property owners prior to me had them move out. And this is in evidence. I just submitted it yesterday, but these are little things that you could glance at. They're for you. He told me I could bring them down here.
Are they all the same?
This is from the Forest Service, and it's
These
really
are all the same, or
they're all
three copies?
They're all the same. There's three.
Okay,
copies.
all right. Okay.
And the forest, you know, it's really hard to get anyone to do anything with the Forest Service that can actually write a letter and find out who it is. So I just received those 2 days ago. I submitted them yesterday morning. They're on the record, and about how I take care of the property, and mowing it is a good thing, not a bad thing. And I'm sorry, but I like my place to look like a park, you know. I'm sure that when the neighbors drive by that property, they get to that place and they look up there and they go, oh, that's taken care of very nicely. And it is. Like the trees that do grow in that on that ridge, which has the better soil in it. I'm not saying it doesn't. It has better soil on the ridge below the log home, and that's where the pines grow. And I trim them up. I take care of them because I like trees too. The comment that there's trees all over, those trees are on the perimeter borders right next to the fence line. You know, they're not over 50 yards from the property line. And they are oak trees and scattered pine trees. And every pine tree, at least 60% of the pine trees on the east side, the moth got are dead and laying on the ground. And I haven't cleaned it up because I wanted people to know that, hey, you know, the gentleman who just bought the property next to me, he's putting a home in right next there on 11 acres. His trees are all dying. And it's a very risky thing to think you're going to plant pine trees and make any, you're not going to make them in your lifetime, because of the trees that were planted over on across the road they're talking about, where those were planted over 30 years ago, and they're slightly bigger than Christmas trees right now. I mean, they're not merchantable trees. They're over 30 years old. It's going to take hundreds of years, not 100 years, hundreds of years to make a merchantable tree. And Gary says that he's a forester. I mean, that's why it's not considered good land. But you know, I'm not going in there and taking out all the oaks and doing all that. That lower pasture was like it is right now from 100-something years ago. You know, it wasn't done by me. I'm not out there hacking trees down and trying to change the landscape. That's not who I am. You know, and but you think you're going to go up there and plant trees for profit? You know, the whole thing that my lawyer was just saying, that whole thing of gross income. If you go to that web page, they send you to another web page that says that the gross profit is not accurate. You know, that's just it sends you there. You know, gross doesn't mean anything. It's what you end up with in your pocket. You know, that's just common sense. The willow tree that's growing by the old home is right over the septic system. That's what willow trees do. They grow where there's water. It takes a lot of water. So it's right over the old septic system from that old home in the ravine. And that's the only one that's there. And it's seek to life right there. You know, I know they take water, but there's comments made that there's fir trees are visible from 7 Mile. There's only 6 fir trees on that whole property, period. And they're all under 8 inches in diameter on the trunk. And I've never cut a fir tree down ever. I love them. You know, they just don't exist out there. And that's around the log home, and the 6 that are there are on the driveway going up. You'll see them on the left-hand side. They are not visible from 7 Mile. And they claim that there's fir trees and pine trees and all these trees that are visible from the pavement. It's just not so. They also claim there's over 300 pine trees that are growing along the road there. Well, on the left-hand side of 7 Mile, that's the old county road. You know, they moved it over. So there are some young trees that are growing in the county road, but only about 35, I think is what I counted, not 300 that they're claiming. So, and some of those are from all the way back to whenever they got started, whenever 7 Mile, the new road was built. Okay, so, and there's none of them hardly taller than I am. You know, and we're talking 30 plus years ago, 25 anyway. So a lot of the information is still misleading.
That it?
That's it.
Thank you so much.
I have one question, clarification. You said Gary says that? Did you say?
Gary Kitzrow.
Oh.
You know, in his report, he's a forester, and he you know.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
Okay, at this time, does the board have any questions for anyone, including staff?
I do have a question related to the record. So for Daniel or legal counsel, there was a suggestion that we, you know, do something, close the record, take some time, review everything. I'm just wanting to make sure we've heard, I think from the other attorney, that they wanted the record open. Can you talk to us about that, what your suggestion is and how we proceed?
Yes, thank you. There is a statute that requires a review body, shall we say, to hold the record open upon request, but that only applies at the first evidentiary hearing, which this is not. That would have been the Planning Commission. So the board is not under any obligation to hold the record open. You can if you wish to do so, but you're not, again, you're under no legal obligation to do so. You could close the record as of today and then schedule a future hearing at which you come back and deliberate on the record to make your decision. If you do decide to hold the record open, it's important that we set a date by which everything has to be submitted, and then an additional little time period for the applicant to file any written rebuttal it might have, because Mr. Sargitakis is correct. The applicant has the burden to demonstrate that all the criteria is met, so they get the last bite of the apple, if you will. So if you want to hold the record open, but not just continue the hearing, for example, you would want to do so, identify a date by which everything has to be submitted, and then maybe an extra week for the applicant to file any final written argument, and then come back and deliberate on the record and make your decision. So you can hold, you really have three options available to you. You can just continue the hearing and allow people time to, come back in 2 weeks, 3 weeks and continue taking testimony. You can close the record entirely and come back in a few weeks and deliberate and make your decision. Or you can hold the record open just for people to submit any written evidence or argument they may have, and then come back and make your decision. So those are, if you wanted to hold the record open, those are the options available to you.
Okay, can I ask you and or our staff, like what your recommendation would be related to this particular situation, given that you have been around this maybe more than we have?
Commissioner Hagee, I am in favor of making sure that the decision makers have the most amount of time they need to make an informed decision, a reasonable decision. So
I guess part of my question is, we have so much information right now, and this process has been going on quite a while. I guess my inclination right now is to just propose that we close the record, given the fact that we have enough, but I don't want to close the record if in fact you or our legal counsel believe there's something else that needs to come in.
I don't believe there's any additional information that needs to come in, Commissioner. No.
It's also reasonable to assume that the parties, knowing about this hearing today, gathered whatever evidence they thought they needed to make their case. And so you presumably have what you need to make a decision from everyone's perspective. And any additional evidence is likely to be repetitive. It's hard to say, but I tend to agree with the board and with Dan that given the length of time this has gone on and the amount of material already in the record, it's unlikely that you would get anything new if you hold the record open for 2 weeks.
Yeah, Madam Chair, what we heard today was repetitive. What is in our packet, I believe this has gone on long enough. I'm in the favor of closing the record and coming back with a decision to move this process forward because I'm not so sure this is the end of it. So that's all I need to say today. Thank you.
Yeah, and I think I would concur. I support closing the record at this time. There's plenty of information for us to continue looking through and then come back and deliberate and get to a decision.
Okay. All right. And I agree. So at this point, if there's no other further testimony or questions.
None at this time, and basically I guess our legal counsel talked about, my understanding is that we will close the record and then we will schedule our next hearing. And then when we come back, we can ask questions of staff, questions of legal counsel and have deliberations.
Yeah.
Is that correct?
Chair Clark, the only other thing is if you want to save staff from having to send out written notice of that new hearing, if you could go ahead and note the date and time of that you will next convene to deliberate on this, then we don't have to send out written notice of that meeting.
Well, I'm trying to close the hearing, so, and then we can move from there, okay?
Great.
So I'm just asking one more time, if there's no further testimony or questions.
None here.
Hearing none, seeing none. The public hearing is closed and the board will now deliberate. Okay. Let's deliberate. So we can still ask more questions of staff at this time. And I do have a question of Mr. Crane, I believe. Okay?
Yep.
It is legal to submit testimony at the very late date that this testimony was submitted, correct?
Correct. So it's important to keep in mind there are two forms of testimony, written and verbal. And you were taking verbal testimony today anyway. So the fact that you also received written testimony is equally permissible.
Okay, thank you. Just wanted to be clear and so.
And I think maybe, can I clarify?
Of
So
course.
that's normal, right? It's unfortunate when substantial information comes into the end. Sometimes that's strategic, sometimes it's not. That's just a matter of whatever, but it's not like we did anything wrong or our staff did it. It was just how things go.
That's correct. And I would agree it's unfortunate, but it's not unusual and it puts you guys in a difficult position.
Yeah.
Okay.
But I think to me, what it did is like it suggests that we really weren't going to be ready to make a decision today anyway, because the likelihood of more information coming in maybe was at least reasonable.
Right.
Okay.
April 6th or 20th. Can I ask staff, which would be best?
That way I can make a motion.
Okay. Any other deliberation you guys would like to make at this point?
No.
And my understanding is we have two issues here, not just the one, so are we ready to make a motion on the first issue? Anybody, which is the 660-004-0025 exception requirements for land physically developed to other uses. Yeah.
I want to get this straight. We've closed the hearing, or we've not, I don't want to close the hearing. I want to close the testimony. And I want to continue the hearing for our deliberation to finish this. Is that proper procedure?
That's absolutely correct. You're closing the record, but continuing the hearing.
Thank you, sir.
Okay. So we make a motion for that?
So I wanted to, maybe we deliberate with staff as to which next board session would be more appropriate. The 6th of April or the 20th of April.
Commissioners, I do have a item on the April 6th agenda. It's the Soak Oregon Burning Man agenda item. I don't necessarily know it will take that long. It's not necessarily a land use hearing, but it may take quite a bit of time just because we'll hopefully have police, fire, and sanitation experts on hand to provide you with any kind of answers you may have concerning the outdoor mass gathering event.
I'm looking at what we currently have, and it's difficult to predict, what will come in between now and then.
Can I look at it?
Sure, but currently, we only have 3 items on for the 6th. One is Daniel Stokin hearing. One is just an amendment and a regular CAFA grant, and this one's very tentative. I don't expect it to go through. The other one, we have almost nothing on right now. That's associated with the.
Yes. Okay. And the Shelley should be easy.
So I think either one is fine. Once you get back here, since you're not accepting any further testimony, and you're just going to deliberate, Daniel, would you expect that the continuation of this hearing would take very long?
That would depend on the questions, Kathy.
So then.
It always depends on the questions, but with legal counsel's assistance and the director's assistance, it may very well be quicker than this. Well, I know it'll be quicker than this hearing, I would think.
So Madam Chair, then I will suggest that the three of us pick the date, and which one do we feel is appropriate for us to review and go through these 3,500 and some plus pages again?
Well, I feel like I've already done my homework, so
Okay.
I think, personally, I think that, the sooner we get to this, the better. Just for everyone concerned, it's just gone on for such a long time. So I'm comfortable with April 6th, but how about you, Shane?
I'm fine. I do have a hard stop at noon because I have to actually have a medical procedure at that time. So, I mean, I'm gonna just be gone over the lunchtime, but I have to be there by noon.
We could put it first on the agenda.
Absolutely.
Yep. Okay, Madam Chair, I move to close the public records portion of this hearing and continue the hearing to the April 6th meeting at the earliest convenient time on our agenda.
Now, do we have to do it for each item? Because we have two. So do we have to do that? We have to make that motion for 0660 or 0025 and then again for 0028, Chris?
You're on mute. The question was, there are two items that were appealed. Do we need to do a separate motion for each? Or is one motion to continue the hearing and close the record sufficient?
Yes, one motion for this. It's a procedural motion to continue the hearing. One motion is sufficient.
Okay.
Because this is just one hearing for this.
Correct.
matter.
Okay.
Two matters.
Okay, all right. So could you repeat that motion, Commissioner Kramer?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I move to close the public records portion of the hearing and continue this hearing to the April 6th board session at the earliest time available on our agenda.
Is there a second?
I'll second that. Yeah.
Okay, any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Chair votes aye. Thank you.
Chair, can I ask a question?
Yes. Yes.
Is it your desire or the desire of the board that staff update the staff report to do additional analysis based on late submitted testimony, or are you fine with the staff report as submitted?
Go ahead.
Madam Chair, I'm fine with the information's presented. We can have opportunity within the beginning of the hearing to ask staff if we have any further questions. Is that, I think that's where I'm at. Hopefully that answers your question, Director. Thank you.
The only thing I would add, Kelly, is that if the evidence that came in today somehow needs to be analyzed and presented to us, then I would say I would encourage you to take the latitude to present that, because that's stuff that you haven't necessarily reviewed, nor have we reviewed. So if there's something there that needs to be brought forth, I'd say bring it forth at that time. But I don't think we need a new staff report for sure.
Is that okay?
Yeah, that's great. Thank you.
Okay. All right. So at this time, I'm going to, where are we?
We're done. We voted. We need a break.
Whoa, we are way.
We do. We need to take a quick break.
Oh, sorry, Commissioner Kramer. I'm just kidding.
Yeah, well, there won't be any powering through anything except you on the way to the door.
Whoa. So So we're going to continue our meeting at 2 PM today. Okay?
So we're
So
gonna-
we're going to push everything that's up on this morning to.
If
this
possible,
afternoon.
if they can be here, I guess.
Well, Kelly is one of them. And she may have already logged off.
So we
Oh, no,
have,
she's there.
No, I'm here.
Kelly,
I'm here.
Can you be back at 2
We can
o'clock this
probably
afternoon?
count
Let's,
things
let's
out.
grab a couple of
We
them.
can push
he's
through.
going to kick me out the door.
No, he's just taking a biological
Oh, you want to
break.
take a break? Oh, I thought you were going to get lunch.
No. Are we done?
Recording stopped.
Bye, Mr. Wilson. Thank you.
I just have one question. How does my, Gary Kitzrow would maybe want a chance to comment on the new, one of his own people?
I think
We
the rest-
closed the
I don't know-
record.
I don't know how that
Close
works.
the record.
Yeah, we're done.
You close the record.
They
So
closed the record.
he can't
Nothing
do
else
anything
is
and
submitted.
the other guy can't do anything. I'm okay with that. I just want to know what.
Yeah,
how it works.
thank you. Good
Okay,
question.
all right, thank you.
So am I coming back at 2 or do you want me to hang
No,
on
you're
for a
staying.
minute?
Hang with us, Kelly.
Okay.
Is Jill going to come up?
I'm here, Kathy. I was just waiting
Oh,
for,
it's online. She couldn't be here.
There
If
she
it,
is.
if it helps, I will literally, I think, be 2 minutes.
Yeah, that was quick.
Okay,
And Jill's is quick.
yeah, and I'm like 5, so that's awesome.
okay. I thought that Steve was.
No. He just wanted
Kill me if I
He
didn't
just
get my
wanted
lunch
to take a
break.
restroom break.
Well, he needs to be more clear. Bye, yo, break.
What's that?
You wanted me to say.
I know.
Yeah.
Yeah, we do it back.
Are we
No,
still
I-
recording?
No, ma'am, I took it off.
Canada's too hard to go.
Paused.
I wish I was in Canada.
Selkirk's?
Yeah, this is quite true. They are, but it also come down into Idaho, I guess. Yeah.
And you're not allowed to do that anymore, right, Sheila? He's
Why
not
not?
allowed because of
I
this.
know, it's like he does it all every time.
Because she had to take care of you for how long?
Like he
Yeah.
broke his other like 5 years
Yeah.
ago. So I was like, oh my God.
Nurse's order, no more. Snowshoes.
So if we leave, you're not gonna talk about this anymore.
No, absolutely not.
We're done.
Are you kidding?
I just want to be had enough.
We've had enough.
over, right?
We've had enough. Yeah, thank you, guys.
So you haven't been up this year, I think.
Only once, right? The one time you broke a leg. Was that last year you broke a leg?
Yeah, year ago, this is the first time.
Oh, it wasn't this year. Oh, okay. Gosh, time goes
But didn't
fast.
you break it at your house?
You broke a ski.
Oh, okay, but the year before you broke it at your house. Okay. And how- Yeah.
Well, we were trying to see all the months.
I never knew yours was such a cheap subject.
Yeah. See ya.
Well, I really am paying for that meeting 2 weeks ago. Big time. That 30-minute meeting. Remember that one?
No.
Yeah,
Oh, the
yeah,
one that was
yeah.
like the short one.
Yeah, yeah. Kathy's
Yeah.
like, oh, get ready.
It's just what it is. Hey, Tyler's not here. I guess I can have his stuff.
He's up there, yeah.
Yeah, but-
Oh, there you go. You can have his chocolate.
Tyler.
He will thank you for it.
Oh, yeah, says he's doing the keto again.
Yes, thank you.
Anytime. Where are you at, Tyler?
In his office.
Yeah, I'm in my office, so I can listen out of one ear and actually get some work done.
And the other ear, Tyler?
Yeah.
Means he's not listening to us.
Oh, no, I was listening.
He was at least paying enough attention to be letting people into the meeting for me.
Mhm.
Yes, he always does that for me. It's very difficult to be taking the minutes and managing all this other stuff too.
I didn't mean to like, but sometimes it's better to just see.
No, now that I know
Yeah.
how to do that, I've been bouncing back and forth between it, so I think it's great.
I like it anyway when I can see their big face instead of barely seeing.
But I need to mention to Kathy, you are looking at this screen, when you talk to somebody, they are seeing you up there.
Right there.
There's the camera.
Oh, I need to look at that.
If you want them to see if you want to be like you're talking to them,
Oh, okay.
that's the camera.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Difficult.
Yeah, totally. Thank you, Kathy.
You're welcome.
And thank you to both of you for your help today.
Sure.
Really appreciate it because these are fun.
Really?
When you're ready, I'll start the recording.
Not quite ready yet. Okay,
Ready?
yes.
Recording in progress.
Okay, we're back for our March 16th Wasco County Board of Commissioners meeting. And next up on the agenda, it looks like Kelly Housley Glover, planning issue a DLCD grant that you'd like to discuss with us. Oh, I'll look there.
Thank you, Chair. For the record, Wasco County Planning Director Kelly Housley Glover. And you have a letter in front of you that needs the board's signature. It's confirmation or acceptance. DLCD has awarded us an $8,000 grant to produce a guidebook for how to update a comprehensive plan. You'll remember that was part of our pitch to LCDC that we'd help under-resourced counties, have some resources to do works on their own comprehensive plans. So that's the long and short of it. Mostly covers staff time.
Okay, questions?
The only question I had, Kelly, was, this is great. So this is basically kind of the conclusion of that we're going to take all that we learned and put it into a format that will help other counties. My only question is this enough money for us to do that work with? And
Yes.
Okay, very good. That was my only question.
Yeah.
Good.
Do we need a motion?
I would move to approve the Department of Land Conservation Development 2021-2023 Technical Assistant Grant Agreement number TA-23-207.
Is there a second?
Second motion?
Any further discussion? Okay, hearing none. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
And chair votes aye. Okay,
So Chair and Board, the other issue in front of you today is a memorandum of understanding from the City of Maupin. I reached out several months ago to the city manager to request use once a month of space there at their new beautiful civic center so that we could start to offer in-person service to planning customers down in South County and kind of save them the long drive north. So we're going to try this out for the summer and see if it's effective use of staff time and a good resource for citizens. And so the memorandum of understanding just covers that request.
I would move to approve the memorandum of understanding regarding licensed, no charge use of the facility at Maupin Civic Center by the Wasco County Planning Department personnel.
Thank you, sir, and I'll second your motion.
any further discussion? That sounds like a good idea. And thank you for doing that.
It's awesome.
Yeah, and I think I'm really glad to hear you say that you're going to evaluate it over the summer and see, because, things are moving virtually, but not everybody feels comfortable in that world. So great. All right. So
And then I would say, hopefully, I'm sure you're gonna do this, but come back to us, in 3 to
Yeah.
plus months and give us a report on kind of number of contacts and all that kind of stuff. That'd be good.
You do that. Thank you.
just to help inform other departments as well. So, yeah. Okay. So any further discussion?
Nope.
Okay. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
And chair votes aye. Thank you. Okay, next up, looks like Jill for Wasco County owned land sales.
You're muted.
There you are.
Thanks, Steve. Good afternoon, Chair, Commissioners. Jill Amory, your assessor and tax collector for Wasco County. It is time for our annual auction again. So before you today, we have 3 properties that we are going to sell at auction. We have chosen May 24, 2022 for the day of the auction. We have 2 bare parcels in the Rivercrest subdivision in Maupin. We also have a parcel, almost a little more than a quarter acre on Reservoir Road in the Dalles. That's out by the water treatment plant. It has an old manufactured home on it with a bit of an addition, some outbuildings that is in really poor shape with the snowpack. It looks like the roof is caved in, so it's pretty much a tear down. So what we've done is taken that into consideration and lowered that value. I imagine somebody who purchases it will go in, take the manufactured home off, clear the lot, and then start over. And so that's what you have before you today.
Madam Chair, I move to approve the sale of tax tax account properties 17279, 17280, and 7311 as outlined in the Wasco County sale of tax foreclosed and surplus real property policy.
I'll second the motion.
Any further discussion?
Just a clarification. So this will be, is this going to be an in-person or just an online closed bid kind of sale?
So we've done all of ours, even during the pandemic, Scott, in person. We did it in the parking lot next to Youth Services last year, and we had a great turnout. So depending on where we're at and if the weather's good, we will probably do that again. If things are really great, we might choose to do it indoor, or if the weather's not good.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
And I have a question. Apologize if you said it already, but the properties in Maupin, are there structures on those?
No, they're bare lots.
Okay, okay. All right, so we have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Okay, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
And chair votes aye. Thank you.
Thank you.
And she'll be coming back to us to report after she gets done with the sale.
We're looking forward to it. Thank you.
I keep looking for people in the audience. It's like, and where's Andrew? But I think he's probably.
He's online. He's online.
Okay. Andrew, you're up if you're online somewhere in cyberspace.
I see him.
Okay.
Yes, hello. Hi there, Andrew.
Yay, okay.
Andrew, Information Services Director. Before you today is an outline of looking at overhauling or upgrading our copier fleet across the county. We have 16 copiers that we're looking to upgrade. Several of them are out of lease. Others still have a few months left on the lease. But what I'm really looking for is to move forward with an agreement with Solutions Yes to really switch from longstanding Ricoh multifunction machines over to Solutions Yes, who provide Kyocera machines. And really quick, I also did a third analysis with CDWG to purchase the hardware right out and provide the services ourselves in-house, which I found to be well above the cost of both Ricoh and Solutions Yes. And I did neglect to put that in the memo, but I did perform that work as well. And so I won't repeat what you have in front of you. If there's any questions, I'm happy to answer them. And again, what I'm really looking to do is move forward with the Solutions Yes quote. It provides potentially negligible cost savings, but also really what this is about is customer service. I've seen much better customer service from Solutions Yes than I have from Ricoh in the last couple of years. So that's where we're at.
And for really, you're just looking for us to give a thumbs up to you to move forward with this?
Yeah. Yeah. So the total hardware costs are roughly around $25,200 annually. And then on top of that is also the copier print charges that are included with that. And so I'm looking to move forward with that agreement and receive.
So, but there's no agreement in the packet. So what you're doing is giving him the thumbs up. The agreement will come back to you. That's where you'll make a motion.
Oh, okay. Okay. So any further discussion or questions for Andrew on this?
I just have a quick question, Andrew. So I'm assuming that when we get through the end of this, meaning all the machines that are currently under current lease, all of the hardware will be swapped out and we'll have new hardware as in new copier. Okay.
Yeah, correct. And so normally in the industry, how this works is we'll lease one of those big multifunction devices that are sitting in the offices, and those devices usually range from 8 to 10,000, a little bit more in total. But we'll lease those monthly because that also includes maintenance and the toner costs, things like that. So it's a way to package all of that stuff in so we don't have to handle the stuff ourselves in-house, which comes at a greater cost.
And what kind of machines will they be? Will it be the same brand or a different brand?
Different brand. So Ricoh is think of it as in computer manufacturers, right? You have Dell, HP, they all perform the same functions, but different manufacturer with a few different capabilities. Kyocera is the brand that is sold by Solutions. Yes. Ricoh is the brand that is sold by
Okay. Kyocera. Okay. So and then the only other thing is that when you swap these things out, like on our computers, they're set up with print drivers or whatever, so we can print to those. You'll change those so we don't go in there and like try to print to the old.
We're just going to put them in and we won't let anyone print to them. That'll cut cost now. Yeah. So, so we will have a transition plan in place, and nobody will be without the ability to print, copy, or fax.
All right. Is it, well, it's just looking, I'm assuming that there'll be different hardware in different locations and not every printer will have color capability. Is that accurate?
Yeah, so not every one of them will. This is going to be based on department needs. There's a few steps that I need to take in order to finalize some of that component. But what we'll do is our plan is to set up both a black and white and color, because obviously black and white is cheaper to print, and so we'll set it up so that by default everything prints black and white with the ability to go color if necessary. That's a procedure to help minimize costs overall.
Perfect. Thank you.
Okay, are we good?
Yep.
Thank you, Andrew.
Thank you, Andrew. All right, great. Okay, I think
Now we're taking a break.
now we're gonna have lunch.
Now you can go first.
Yeah, exactly. So we're going to not adjourn, but we're going to
You're gonna
continue. Recess until 2:00.
Yes.
So that I can have lunch.
I know. Remember we talked about why do we go to?
I know, and now I know why, okay? Because I have to go out and get lunch. And are we still recording?
Recording stopped.
No. Okay, so that I'm not hangry this afternoon.
All right. My notes here. That was an exciting first public testimony.
I'm gonna have to plug my iPad in. It burned all the juice.